Cool, right, I think we're live. Hello, everybody. Sorry for the slight delay in getting started, and welcome to a very special evening. This is an evening that we have organised online for the first time. It's so sad that we can't be here together physically. For those of you who've not been along to these events before, my name is Byrne. I'm the Member of Parliament for Hodge Hill in Birmingham. And it's my great honour to be the chair of the all-party group of children of alcoholics. And I'm going to do quite a bad job at just trying to host tonight and keep a phenomenal group of speakers in some kind of order. For those of you who have been along to these events before, it's a very special evening because it is in memory of an extraordinary man called David Stafford. And David was someone who was instrumental in defining the cause for children of alcoholics. He wrote a brilliant book that helped many of us with our sanity in all sorts of difficult circumstances. And over the last few years, we've used International Children of Alcoholics Week to come together in the Houses of Parliament and to organise an evening in David's memory and to basically give each other loads of hugs. And it's really slightly sad that we're just not able to embrace each other physically tonight. So we're going to be doing that virtually. For many people who have come along to these evenings before, it's been one of the first times when they've recognised that they're part of a much, much bigger tribe. They're part of a much, much bigger movement. They get to meet amazing people like Calum, who again have written amazingly about this cause, provided real strength for people in times of difficulty. And we can just get to be together and laugh, cry, hug, talk about love and loss, and the fact that a different kind of future is possible. So I'm not sure what kind of emotional sizzle we're going to get out of tonight. We will try our best to give you as much emotional sizzle as possible. But thank you so much to Nicola and the team for putting together tonight. From the bottom of our heart, it truly is appreciated. Now, I'm going to hand over to Josh in a minute, but before I do, there's a couple of things that I just need to brief you on. So we have now, I'm glad to say, reformed the all-party group of for children of alcoholics. We have to reform these groups every time there's a general election. Them's the rules, basically. We have to get back together, and what happens is that I send an email around to parliamentarians to basically say, look, we've got this group, it's been going for a few years, we've had some real successes, we'd love you to get involved. And then what happens is that people email you back to say, thank goodness you're doing that, let me tell you about my story. And the stories that you get from parliamentarians are always deeply, deeply moving, very, very humbling, often shocking, often awful, and a real reminder that this curse that has scarred all of us in different ways is no respecter of where you come from in life. This is something that everybody, no matter where they're from, can be hurt by. So anyway, we have reformed the group for children of alcoholics for this parliament, which is great news. We've agreed a work plan for the year ahead. And top of the list of that work plan is checking back in with some pilots that we helped get established a year or two ago. So thanks to some brilliant campaign work by everybody involved in NACOA, we secured about £6 million to go into a whole range of pilots so that good people in different parts of the country could just test what would work best. And we think it's time that some of those pilots reported back so that we can begin spreading that message about what really makes a difference and what really works. And this is something, I'm afraid to say, that is needed now more than it has been for a long time. Because the second thing that we do every year is we do a big research project. We basically write out to councils and health services right the way across the country, and we ask them a simple question: have you got in place a strategy for children of alcoholics? How much are you spending on addiction services? And what kind of caseloads are you beginning to see in your particular patch? Some of the results that we had this year were good, some of them were not good. The good news is that thanks to the campaign work of the last few years, almost every council in the country now has a strategy for children of alcoholics. You guys made that happen. When we first did this exercise a few years ago, there were almost no one with that strategy in place. That has now changed, thanks for you. So we, as a cause, we've now got this issue on the agenda. But I'm afraid the bad news is that the number of admissions into A&E due to alcohol continues its remorseless rise. And yet, the budgets that are going into treating addiction, they've been cut by about another 2%. So here we've got a situation where at least everybody knows about the challenge, but the problem is just continuing its remorseless growth, and the budgets that we're putting in to deal with it, when they should be going up, they're actually going down. And so that tells us that the agenda that we set out in our 10-point manifesto for change, a manifesto written by children of alcoholics, we have still got a long way to go. We've got a long way to go before we can declare any kind of victory. And so that's why events like tonight are so important, because they bring us together, they let us check in with each other, hear about what's going well, think, listen, understand, and begin planning for the future. So that's why tonight's so important. That's why Nicole has done such an incredible job bringing people together tonight. We're going to hear from a couple of very special speakers in a moment. We're going to hear from Camilla first, I believe. But first, it's my very great pleasure to hand over to Josh, who I miss so much. Josh, I see what you're doing online, man, and it is just so incredible. And you're so strong, and you're so handsome, and you're so articulate, and you're so passionate, and you're so brilliant about what you're doing, and you are just changing people's lives. So let me hand the metaphorical stage to you, my friend. Share with us a few thoughts, and then I think we're going to have a little film, I believe.
Okay, yeah. I'll say a little hello for now, and before we get in and we watch Kerry's video, the Lego film. What Kerry's I think been able to do with the films that she's created over the last, I don't know, couple of years now. They have a way of kind of piercing through and reaching people in a way that I've not really seen before with any other kind of content. The Lego film is a prime example of that. I think it's one that it's a film that adults will feel moved and compelled by, but it also sends a message to children as well. So it reaches everybody with the same level of power. And so I just want to really hold testament to what Kerry's done and her kind of continued work, just as Jonathan Ashworth joins us now. So while Jonathan gets settled, if Piers shares the video, and then once we've watched Kerry's video, we'll come back, and I think we're going to go into the discussion with me and the other three.
Cool.
You were eagerly waiting for the bell, but it isn't the same for me. When the school's closed, I wasn't running, no open arms waiting, you see.
Mum's been drinking much more lately. The voices get louder when they think I sleep. While I braced in case he gets angry, and I never let myself dream too deep.
I love to say bye in the mornings, off to school, creased shirt and damp shoes. I sit close and feel safe by my teacher, smelling of coffee and not just of booze.
At night I wait for my mum's gaze to catch mine, to see what's going to happen next. Glazed eyes mean it's no tea, to my room I'll scurry, pretending to revise for a test.
I long for the happier evenings when I can tell her about tricky English and maths, but these evenings are becoming infrequent. I keep repeating, this too shall pass.
On social media, I may look on with envy as my friends cozy in on this long break. Yes, I'm a bit worried about the virus, but Mum's drinking will keep me awake.
So I'll keep trying to hide what Mum's drinking. I'll be good and try to keep the peace, but really I'll miss all my school friends. My mum's suffering from a disease.
I'll chat online and make up stories. Each day to Wonderland I will go. I'll dance and I'll try writing poems. I escape to my bedroom, or so I hope so.
But if it all gets too much to bear now, I know there's one place to call. If Mum gets angry or poorly, too much drink or even withdrawal.
Nakoa are there to listen, to hear my stories or even my cries. They can be a great distraction, for once I can let down my disguise.
So please, if your parents are drinking, know that you aren't alone. Nakoa is there anytime to listen. Please just pick up the phone.
Oh my Lord. Oh. So for those of you who are supporters of NACOA, I mean, this is the kind of incredible work that NACOA is able to do. And, you know, it's impossible for NACOA to do this work without your friendship and your support. And crikey, you can just see what a difference it makes. Right, so we're going to have a little chat now. We're going to have a little round table, and then we're going to hear from John Ashworth, who has been a real hero this week in making the case and making the cause more widely known around the country. Calum, maybe I can kick off with you, if that's okay. I mean, your book, Second Best, it was such a seminal book in many ways. It certainly for people like me, it helped me understand so much of the dynamics of what was going on. I'd be really interested in just any reflections on the journey that you've seen many of us now take. Maybe say a word about how the struggle feels today, and maybe any sort of reflections you've got on the kind of progress we should be shooting for this coming year or two.
Of course, Liam, obviously pleasure to see you, my friend. It's too bad we can't do it in person, but I'm sure we will very soon. First and foremost, Carrie, incredible film. No matter how many times I watch that, it gets me triggered and goosebumps and going, what a great way to deliver that message to people that might not know what's going on. For me personally, I'm very proud to say I've been an ambassador and a patron to NACOA for the past 13 years. And for a lot of those years, it was me wanting to share my story to, at the very beginning, want to heal myself. But what's happened and why I'm such a supporter for what NACOA does is that they have this platform with all these people that are able to share their story to resonate or inspire somebody to speak up, seek help, or take action to live a better life. So now my goal with NACOA is just to share what I can about the changes they've made for me personally, not having a place to know where I could go and speak to, but now finding passion and purpose in such a large part of my life, letting the next child or the next young adult or the next whoever it is know that there is a place they can go to find the answers to better their life. So what they're doing is incredible. And what you said earlier, Liam, I wanted to shout out Josh as well, and anybody who's gone on to the NACOA Instagram, because right now our main outreach and tool is social media. And, you know, I've always been an advocate to use social media as a place to do good, right? And if you can influence well, then I think you're using it right. And what Josh is doing is putting himself in it all day, every single day, with other people who want to come on and share their story. And the whole goal of using that platform is to reach out to somebody who may not know, and help inspire them or give them answers and solutions to what they're going through. Because it is rife all over the country. There'll be many kids at home not being able to do what a lot of us probably were able to do, as in get away, stay busy, play sport, be active, avoid what might be going on at home. And right now they are at home. And I know it's been discussed many a time, but they're in it. They're at home in it with no way to avoid it. So if we can at least use this platform of social media and NACOA's page just to start to let them know there's a place they can tune in to find help and find answers.
So when you look at some of the strategies that have now been developed by NACOA, I mean, what sort of difference would they have made to you if they'd been available? I mean, some of the stories in your book, I mean, they're pretty gruesome, right? So how would it have made a difference to you and how you are now?
I mean, I'm the kind of person that says I'm happy with the journey. I've trusted the process all along, right? But I think what I was maybe back then ashamed or didn't know or nervous or angry because I had no one else to tell me it was okay.
Yeah,
you know, and a lot of times people are going to have to learn these lessons themselves. But if we can help provide answers for the ones that don't know what the answers are just yet, and if we can use our experiences through NACOA to help them speed up that process or at least make it a little bit easier, then I think good on them. But I know that when NACOA came into my life, it was when I was not a child anymore. I was a young man, but then finding them then, and then using that platform I had to then share to the kids, in case you're going through what I went through, here is this. That's what my goal was. So the difference it would have made, probably none when I was younger, because I just cracked on with it. Didn't know how to deal with it at the time. But now we have some people that speak up, like yourself, like John, like Sophie, like Camilla, that speak, like David, that speak up to now let that younger them know you don't have to stay alone. You don't have to stay quiet.
Yeah, certainly that point about dealing with shame and speeding up the process, that's certainly been true for me. So just before I come to Sophie and David, I mean, Josh, what an incredible job you're doing there, man. I mean, just tell us a little bit about how you're coping with it. I would think lots of us would be quite interested in how you're staying so strong throughout it all, but also what are you sort of seeing and feeling as you've been in it?
Look, in terms of how am I keeping through it, it helps a lot more now that we've got, like Calum said, a lot more people that are willing to come forward and speak, right? So I do a lot less of actually sharing my story now and more creating space for other people to come in and share. I think at the beginning, I perhaps almost got a bit hooked on the kind of validation and the being seenness that I was getting from sharing my story. And so I did it and I did it and I did it. And then I had to sort of take my foot off the gas a little bit. So I found a much better balance with that in my life today. But what I do recognize with the work that we do online is that there's a real yearning for the space. People don't perhaps know. And I don't know, I very vividly remember the first time we had the APPG. I remember somebody standing up and saying, the problem we have, and they were from another charity, the problem we have is children of alcoholics won't speak. And I remember I was sat next to Hillary and we were like, that's just not true. Like we've got the figures from the helpline to say that they will speak. And you know, what we've managed to prove with the work that we do online since then is that children, well, actually you can't shut us up once we get started, right? But once you create that space, then there is a real yearning for it. And I think, you know, just to kind of finish what I'm saying, most of us don't want much else other than to just be seen and heard when we share our story. That's kind of all we really look for. And I think if we can create that space for adults, then we'll get the momentum to make the changes that's needed for young people, you know?
And are you noticing any kind of patterns in the interaction that you get on Instagram or other social media platforms you're using?
Just that, you know, it's predominantly, of course, in the social media space, it's adults, right? But nearly every adult, once they see us and hear us for the first time, are having those 1 million kind of light bulb moments of, I didn't know this was a thing. I lived my whole life without ever understanding this. Yeah. So I get, you know, when we see that, when we recognize that, how many people in their 30s, 40s and 50s are coming forward saying, I can't believe that I've struggled with this all on my own all my life. The change that needs to happen is that they don't accidentally find NACOA through a Google search or on a radio. It's that at 5 and 6 years old, when they're in it, they are shown the information that they need, right? They are shown that they're not alone. Every single person I speak to says, if I'd seen a poster that said some parents drink too much, that's it. Some parents drink too much. I'm not saying I wouldn't have gone down the path I went down, right? But I would have recognized that I wasn't alone, and what I was experiencing was a thing, right? And I think that's so vital.
Yeah. So Sophie, can I sort of throw the floor to you now, because I mean, you did this amazing Instagram live. It says in my notes you're a relatively new friend of NACOA, but I don't know. So I don't know when and how you made that connection. I'd love to know a bit about that, and I'd love to know, if you can share it, just a word or two about how you felt when you found NACOA and how it made things different for you.
So for me, I think it was a difficult journey, because I'd been through this whole process of dealing with the childhood trauma, dealing with complex PTSD and getting to a certain point. And then I just wanted to be really loud about it, because I knew that I'd spent so much of my life living in shame and kind of trying to hide it, and not even knowing that it was an issue, because in my head I was always like, well, some people have it worse, some people have this, and always downplaying what I went through. And so it was kind of more a space where I just wanted to be more open about what I experienced. And I think it was actually Jonathan Ashworth that I saw sharing something on socials, and I just found NACOA, followed it, didn't really think much more, and then I'd see a post and I'd think, yes, and so I'd share, and I'd be like, did you know that this is happening and more people need to speak about this? Because it's something that I feel very passionate about in the world of media, because a lot of the time people are confident talking about mental health, but they're not confident about talking about mental illness. So they're open to saying, oh, you've got to look after your mental health, you've got to self-care, but it's like, I was in an emotional flashback today. I was dealing with suicidal ideation, that people kind of go, oh, can't you just talk about having a bubble bath? Oh, I'm not comfy with that. So my goal was to find as many sources where we can just talk about these types of experiences without shame, so that it takes away the power when you're in it.
Did you feel shame? Was shame part of what was going on for you?
It's one of the biggest things, but I felt shame about everything, but I didn't have a name for it. So all I knew is that I was wrong. There was something wrong with me, and I didn't think people really liked me, and I'd go into these spirals of sadness and depression, and I didn't know what was happening. So I just assumed it was me and my fault. Yeah. But now I can see that that's shame. So if I see even a tiny little bit of that now, I'm like, come on, bring that back. That's not, let's get back on in the adult way of thinking. I'm an adult with adult resources.
When you were growing up then, I mean, did you, maybe even into young adulthood, I mean, did you feel that there was anybody who you could talk to or empathize with or make that kind of connection? Sometimes it's really hard when you don't really understand it yourself. That's part of the challenge, and so people just think you're sad. Partners often don't quite know how to relate to you because you're being like that again.
I think growing up as a child, I didn't really have anybody, but I also wouldn't talk about it to people. So you might just sometimes remember my grandma talking about me being quiet for ages and dealing with all of this stuff, and then just going, and it all just came spewing out. So I always tried to make everything perfect and always try and look perfect and make sure that everything was fine. I am happy. I'd even
that's on the list.
I'd tell stories about how fabulous my mum, who drank, I'd tell stories about how fabulous she was and tell these outrageous stories that actually had quite a dark undertone, but the way I delivered them was like fun. And so, but one of the strongest things I think with dealing with it and facing it and going through the grief and going through the healing of it, is that now I don't go to that place, but also you mentioned with partners, I'm now able to spot my behavior, which makes all the difference. And it makes you able to have a healthy relationship for the first time, because you're able to go, look, I know this is my stuff, but I'm feeling really insecure right now, and I think that you're going to leave me. And you can say, and it's nothing to do with you, but I'm this is what I'm going through. And you're more attracted to those strengths in people rather than being attracted to, say, narcissistic people or people who need you, who are like leaning on you too hard, or whatever that might be. Yeah,
you can't see this necessarily, but everyone is kind of listening to you nodding. One of the things that I don't know if you ever got a chance to read David Stafford's book, but in the introduction there is just this incredible, it's almost like a checklist of kind of behaviours that are quite common amongst children of alcoholics, and it was shocking, affirming, reassuring. It was just everything when I read it for the first time. And when I read it, I realized why there are so many people in politics who are children of alcoholics, because
same in entertainment.
Yeah, well, it's probably similar. So you're armor plated, you put on armor plating, so nothing can hurt you, nothing, you can't get any swords through, can't get any arrows through, and you're constantly trying to fix things. It's what you just said just now, actually. You're trying to make things perfect. It's you're trying to tidy up. You're trying to make it all fine again, and you're so sort of crazily driven that actually, I don't know if John is sort of smiling at me, because we've never actually done this estimate, but I would not be surprised if about a third of the people in the House of Commons are children of alcoholics. Seriously, it's that kind of thing, right? David, you've now just become a total hero, and you're now raising like thousands of pounds for NCOA, which you're now a trustee and everything, which is just incredible. But tell us a little bit about your story and how you found NCOA and what kind of difference it's made for you.
Well, I first actually spoke about my childhood. Really, I did an interview when I was in Saudi, when I had a boxer fight on the Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz rematch out there. It was about 18 months now, something like that. And I think it was Piers or it was Hillary that got in touch with me by email, telling me about NCOA, because they've seen the video, or somebody passed the video on to them. And they invited me down to the House of Commons to do the talk. And I was a little bit nervous because where I was going, and I didn't really know. I've never really spoke about it publicly before, not to people. I mean, like I said, I did an interview, but that's just a one-on-one conversation with somebody that you kind of know, and you forget the camera's there. But then I'm in a room with a bunch of strangers talking about it, and I was very, very surprised at how at ease I kind of felt, because I was listening to everybody else speaking. It's like listening to you guys now.
That's interesting.
You realize that, because I've kind of kept it in a box until I'm 45 now. So I started speaking about it really 18 months ago. So I'm 43, 44. Calum, you touched on it when you said about you felt the shame. I was ashamed in my past, and I didn't want anybody to know. But then when after I spoke at the House of Commons with you guys, the feedback that I got from it, and people that were messaging me and talking to me about it, I was kind of amazed at what sort of impact it makes. And so that's why now, when I was asked to be a patron and everything, and I jumped on board, and I see it as something I'm very, very proud of, because I understand the impact that it makes. And as this past year has gone on, just people being more and more aware of it. I did a couple of interviews recently where I spoke about my childhood, and I'm getting more and more DMs, more and more kids that are in lockdown. And this is my worry, is the first thing that came to my mind when we went into lockdown, it literally is the first thing that I said to my wife. I was worried about the kids that are going through what I went through as a kid. Like, we've said already before, we were in a position where we go to school, so we get that 6 7 hours away from what you have to put up with at home. The kids now that are in lockdown haven't got that break. You can't go and play football with their mates.
Yeah.
You know, the parents aren't going to say, "Oh, just run to the shop for me," like I had. You know, that was my break. You know, run to the shops. My mum used to get me to the shop, and you could get cigarettes at whatever age. So I'd have to go run to the shop to get cigarettes from my mum. But it's a break out of the house. These kids now are in lockdown. They've got no break. So when you're like I was, when you're in your room and you hear the footsteps walking up the stairs, and you're crapping yourself because you're doing a checklist, thinking, "What have I done wrong? What is she angry about now?"
Yeah.
You haven't got that break. Now it's the full 24/7 that are living in the house, and I worry about that. You know, that's been a big impact on me over this last year. What's been going off? But
what have been the nature of the messages that you got back in? And you said you were a little bit surprised.
Yeah.
Did you say you were a bit surprised about what the number of messages that came back in, or?
But both really, because, like I said, I kept it quiet, and I think one thing when we'll become aware of Nicola is that we're actually not alone, and there is a lot of people that have the same thought process as what we had, went through the same things, but handled it similar to what we had, thought those same things that we had. So I was surprised at the amount of people that get in touch with me, because number one, I didn't think the reach would be as great as what it is.
Really?
But I didn't think that people would connect with me as much. I don't know. I just don't see it as though like I have an impact on people like that. But I mean, I said it to Josh before. You know, the messages that I'm getting, it's devastating. It really is. You know, kids that are scared, kids that are asking me, they've seen my video or they've seen me on TV and they didn't realize that I went through that. How did you manage to do that? I can't see a light at the end of the tunnel. How did you? So you're convincing people that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I think that's powerful. That's every one of us that have went through that as a kid. We all survived what we went through, and whatever level it was, and the thoughts that you have where you think, is this what my life's about? Is this how it's going to be? And you can see why a lot of kids give up, and a lot of kids think that it doesn't get any better than this.
Yeah, I mean, I must say, I did not think change was possible, and I didn't think recovery was possible. And actually, it was through meeting people, like reading some of Calum's stuff, meeting others in this group, I took a lot of convincing that change was possible. Calum, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add to what David was saying there. You know, when you listen to everybody on here talk about how as adults we found NACOA, and then it's like, wow, there's others going through this, right? How lucky are we found this? The reason it's so important, Liam, what you and John are doing right now with the support of every single person on this call is because we found this as adults. There will be hundreds of thousands of children that won't have found this, right? That need help finding this. And this is what we need to keep doing, is that we all find this as I said, as adults, because kids maybe don't know where to go or don't know where to look or don't know that it's there. So if we can as a unit, and the government can outlay these things to the councils or whatever it might be, to say we have to let the children and the parents of the children know that this place exists. Because once people find it and know it exists, that's when the big changes will start to happen.
Yeah.
Sure. Can I just add to that very quickly as well?
Yeah.
Because what you have sat in front of you now is what looks to me, you know, you four quite rounded people, right? Who seem to have their stuff together at the moment, right? Yeah.
Completely misjudged that.
At least you look that way. Yeah.
Putting on a brave face here.
But the point I want to make is, you know, I think David's story is amazing, that he can give people that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, right, and all that kind of stuff. But let's not get it twisted here. And I've heard everybody's story in here. We went through some dark times, right? And those times were touch and go, right? and I want to tell you that I'm here. The reason I'm here is a lot to do with luck and some of the things that showed up in my life, right? And you know, it is testament to us as people what we've been able to do. But I think we also, we must make sure that we do highlight that for a lot of kids, it don't go that way, and they don't end up here.
I want to draw out that point just in the last 8 or 9 minutes we got, because David is right to highlight the challenge has just got a lot tougher, right? So we put out some work at the beginning of dry January, and we brigaded together some research from Alcohol Change UK. And their surveys found that nearly 1 in 3 adults are drinking more than in previous years. 1 in 5 were concerned about their increased drinking. And the volume of calls that have come into NACOA, I mean, these things, your eye is always caught by, the real horror stories. Reports of parents stockpiling cases of beer while the children go hungry. Children calling the helpline describing living with increasingly unpredictable behaviour, navigating, it's the verb, navigating aggression between family members, and David, to your point, really, feeling frightened and trapped on a daily basis in their own homes. So, as a country, we've been through a hell of a time this last year, but for many people, there's going to be some real scars, I think. And so I think the question I'd just like to put to you all really is, the mountain's got a bit higher in some ways. And I would be just really interested in some of the things that you think we should try and think about doing to step up over the next year. Sophie, I'd be quite interested in just your point of view on this, just because you're right about the entertainment industry. We sort of stumbled across a bit of a network of people in the entertainment industry who sort of said, oh yeah, me too, we'd love to get you on the show, kind of thing. But how do we work together, I suppose, to get our messages across?
One of the things that I know I've been trying to push is I work at Bauer Media, which is like one of the biggest radio companies. And I want to try and get us working with charities like NACOA, because we do work with charities and we do talk about these issues. We do talk about mental health. But I think people don't realise what a big deal childhood addiction in the family is for people. And it's not something that you just grow out of. It's not just something that happens to kids. It's something that sticks with you for life. And I think trying to find a way to package that to put to people who don't understand what it is the big challenge, because if you've been through it, you know it. But if you haven't, it's like, oh, well, it's a bit negative, isn't it? Can't we go for like everyone loves children in Africa, Yeah. And so I think it's just how we package it for the media.
Yeah, interesting. David, you were nodding along there.
I agree with what you're saying there. How people kind of like, because it's that kind of subject, people don't really, they want to seem as though they're sympathetic, but they're afraid to kind of like embrace it. And just going back to how do we get out there? Every commercial radio station that's out there, they put on all you have these advertising slots and things like that. Would it really hurt them to just put in a little slot each day during the peak hours, a little slot, just a helpline number for these kids, just so people that are listening, kids are listening to music all the day, all times, on podcasts, on whatever it is, a little advert just with a number, and then they're aware, because like we've all said, until one of us has told, or we've come across it on Instagram or something like that, somebody shared it, until one of us has been told about NACOA, nobody knew about it. I certainly didn't know anything about this. And so a kid that's growing up and whatever kids are doing, they're not going to be aware of this, but maybe these things need to be dropped in, because nobody mentions it. When you're talking about, when on the news and the media, they're talking about the effects of the pandemic, I haven't seen once where they spoke about the effects on the kids that are stuck at home with parents that are addicted.
It's completely true. And we've tried to pitch this story in a couple of times, actually.
Yeah, we saw John do it the other day, did it great, but it isn't enough, is it? It's just one of us talking about it. It's not like it's not like a topic or a source that it's like, oh yeah, let's go for it. You have to bring it up. And I think, sad to say, but it's because we are a big drinking culture and there's still a huge stigma. It's like that kind of thought is like, oh no, it's not that big of a thing when everybody wants to enjoy drinks at the weekend, you know? So we just have to keep banging the drum until we let everybody know the importance of the children that are dealing with the people who just like to have the drinks. No one's saying don't drink. No one's saying don't enjoy yourself. People are just saying that there's young kids that are dealing with it a lot more intense that are out there that don't know that there's answers.
Yeah, I think there's a real fine balance as well, to pick up on what Calum said there, right? We don't want to come across like we are alcohol bashing, right? Because that is going to put everybody off of us and they're not going to want to listen to the message that we have, right? We are talking more about the 1 in 5 that live with a parent that drinks hazardously. There are societal things that we can look at here where everyone perhaps has a difficult relationship with alcohol. I think the work that we've started to do in schools is something that needs to continue, so that we're educating teachers to understand what somebody living in a home presents like, because it's not going to be the stereotypical picture that they have in their mind of what a child of an alcoholic might look like. And then, as much as we can, we need advocates, right? Because we need, adult advocates like the people in this room. I mean, like from my standpoint, I was looking for a hero all my life when I was a kid. Yeah, and my dad couldn't be it. Yeah. And I desperately wanted my dad to be my hero, and he couldn't be it. For all the want in the world, he couldn't. And if I don't find other heroes in my life to look up to, that's when I end up looking for heroes in gangs or difficult relationships that don't serve me, or I start getting caught up on these paths. Nobody falls into the wrong crowd. They go to a crowd looking for something. And if we don't meet the needs of these kids by giving them heroes and giving them the information that they need and deserve, then they will find themselves in on the wrong path. And I think that's our duty as a society. And that's why we have to be careful. And we've certainly not done it tonight, but not to trip into alcohol bashing or taking away the fun. Let's advocate for the children, the children's plight. And really, those stories when we got ourselves on the front page of when Camilla worked hard to get us on the front page, that was when we were introduced to producing a narrative that, the bedtime story thing resonated with people. Yeah. People said, wow, I can't imagine not having a bedtime story from my parents. So, I think that advocacy, but also we need to make sure that we're investing in making sure that people know what the child of an alcoholic looks like, because most teachers that I'm working with, not most, that's probably unfair, a lot of the teachers that we're delivering the training to at the moment have absolutely, they're still looking at, drinking from a paper bag on a park bench. And if the parent ain't doing that, then they ain't got a problem with alcohol. So we really need to change that.
I did want to ask you just about this in the last couple of minutes. I mean, have you learned anything about the way that we need to adapt or deploy education material? How do we work with that crucial front line of teachers in a more effective way, do you think?
Look, one of the most important things is there's no fix here in a lot of cases. A lot of the children that we're talking about are not living necessarily under circumstances where child protection need to be involved, right? They're living in circumstances where their mum and dad disappear at night into alcohol, right? And these kids are being missed off. And what tends to happen is if there's no fix, if there's no how do we take the children away or how do we stop their parent drinking, then people don't really realize that we can still do loads to support. Yeah, if my mum and dad can't be emotionally available for me, there needs to be some other adults available to me that can be emotionally available. And right now, in schools, they don't exist.
Yeah,
they don't exist because teachers' hands are tied behind their backs because of academic pressures. Yeah. And so if your mum and dad can't show up for you, then perhaps no one is. And so we need to create time for teachers to do what they go into the profession for, which is to be there for children. And at the moment, they don't get the opportunity to do that. And we're always looking for, quick fixes that create stats. And, we could go off on a white tangent with that, but we've got to get back to some of the basic supporting of holding space for these kids and letting them know.
Yes.
Have you found teachers positive, if nervous? Sometimes they're probably a bit nervous, but I mean, if they've been constructive.
Yeah, they are. I think one thing that you're going to find is we do a little bit of this with children.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really want them to tell me everything, because then we open up a can of worms, and then what do we do?
Right.
So there is a bit of a like, let's just make sure that they're okay enough, and then when they're adults, at least we can blame them. Simply speaking, but teachers, most teachers you don't go into teaching in our society for the money or the sociable hours, right? You go in because you want to help children, yeah. And so most of them are really receptive, but often they're quite restricted because they're under so much pressure to academically to meet deadlines and stuff like that. So for me, we need to give them more time and give them the tools that they need, because they want what's right. They want to help, but they're often so restricted.
Yeah, very, very useful. Right, that brings us up to just after 20 past. That's what I love. I love two things in particular about this conversation. So one is the way that it's just been a kind of a multiplier effect over the last few years. I mean, there are now just such brilliant, determined, passionate advocates for this cause. The way that we've kind of found each other and grown and gained strength from each other to proselytize about this, I just think is just so magnificent. When we were beginning this about 5 years ago, we used to say, in order to normalize the conversation, we have to organize the conversation. And now it's almost becoming self-propelling. We're all kind of like bouncing off each other now. And that is, that's got a lot further to go, but it's great, the position that we're getting to here. But the second thing that I think has been really helpful is just the candor. We're able to be quite honest with each other because of that shared legacy and experience that we've got. We're quite determined people, I think, but quite realistic. And I think that candor is quite important as we begin to get into the design of more solutions, because that's the phase we're now in, thank God. Being honest with each other about what's working, what's not working, where we need to refine, where we need to recalibrate, how we need to get things through in the media in different ways. That is really a conversation that we've got to have together, because no one else is going to organise this. It's down to us, basically. Cool. Right, John. Brilliant job. Everything you've been doing this week has been absolutely amazing. We're going to hand you the stage and screen for 15 minutes before we're going to do another little film, and then we're going to hear from Camilla. But
okay, all right. Well, thank you.
Over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Liam. And I'm not intending to speak for the whole of 15 minutes. So if the people doing the film want to be ready to go sooner, that's fine. I've not prepared a 15-minute speech. I'll just say a few things, but just to say I'm absolutely honoured, thrilled to be back here. It's a shame we're not actually meeting in person. I mean, if you think back 12 months ago when we had our meeting a year ago, literally on the cusp of this pandemic about to sweep across the country, I don't think any of us quite appreciated what the next 12 months were set to be like. I mean, I had been having meetings with all the different sort of chief medical officers and all these medical experts who have now become familiar faces on our TV screens, but I don't think any of us quite realised the 12 months that were ahead of us, even if I was getting an inkling of how serious things were going to be. But and hopefully by next year we'll be able to meet in person again, and I think we probably will be able to, but we've still got a way to go. But I'm just really pleased that we've managed to come together online and talk about these issues. And I just want to thank you, Liam, for all the work you continue to do through the all-party group in the Commons. I'm really, really pleased that Camilla is going to be doing the main speech in a few minutes. Camilla has become such a great ally and friend of NACOA, a great ally and friends of children of alcoholics, a great friend of mine, even though perhaps on some of the big political issues we may well have differences of opinion, although that's not always obvious when we get together and we have a laugh and we have a joke together. But Camilla is such a champion for this agenda. And I just want to say about Camilla before she gives her remarks, Camilla is a really, really senior journalist in this country on one of the big newspapers, the Daily Telegraph. And Camilla has a really important agenda, a very senior role there, reporting and writing about not just politics, but about the royalty, big issues with lots of controversies and complexities that she has to write about. And it could have been really easy for Camilla to just have given up on NACOA and to said, you know what, I'm too busy. I've got so much on my plate, reporting on politics, reporting on whatever's happening in the royal family and all the ins and outs and the interests and that of the royal family. She could just say, look, you know, I'll be supportive, but I've got too much to do. So, you know, I can't be involved anymore. But she still finds time to do this work and to champion this work and to make sure that one of the big newspapers in this country, the Daily Telegraph, is aware of this agenda, and where it can, she makes sure that this agenda gets covered in the Telegraph. She gave me a really brilliant opportunity a few weeks ago to write an article, and I know she uses her platform to improve the world and to improve things for children in the circumstances that many of us sadly were in when we were growing up. So I'm just thrilled that Camilla's going to be offering a few more in-depth reflections in a minute. Great as always to be with you, Josh. We're always sort of tag teaming on the media a little bit. You know, but you're on the media more often than I am, so I need to get tips from you on how to handle those tricky interviews. I'm sure it's only a matter of time before you're on I'm a Celebrity or something like that, given you're on the media so often. And great to be with David, and great to sort of Zoom meet you, Sophie. And it was really kind of you to say that you found out about NACOA through one of my clips, and that is encouraging, and that's why we speak out on these issues, and that's why I speak out on these issues to make a difference. And I just want to say it's great to be here with Calum, who is a great friend, who reinforces the points I'm making, a great ambassador for NACOA. And one of the things, I think there's something sort of spooky, if that's the right way of putting it, that the way in which Calum and I have come together to work with NACOA and on this project. Because I think, as I said last year when I spoke, my dad was a croupier in the Manchester Playboy Club in the 70s, and Calum's dad would have been playing for Man United. My mum was a bunny girl in the Manchester Playboy Club. I am sure Calum's dad must have gone into the Manchester Playboy Club at some point in the 1970s when my dad would have been there and my mum would have been there. And I just wished my dad was alive today, that I could ask him, did you ever meet the amazing George Best in the Playboy? My dad was a massive Man United fan. I'm obviously an MP for Leicester now, so I'm a Leicester City fan, obviously. So
ruined that story. It was such a good story there, John.
Ever the politician. Yeah, ever the politician.
Going so well until that point. But I wish he was alive, because I would love to have asked him, did George, I mean, he must have gone in there in the 70s, and did you ever meet him? And my mum was a bunny girl. And I just think there's something so nice about the fact that here we are together working on this agenda, because of the situation and that our fathers found themselves in, and the circumstances of that, and what they were dealing with, and how it impacted us, and how we're trying to improve things for other children. And the other weird thing, by the way, is that my dad actually had long dark hair and a dark beard, so he actually even modelled himself.
I think a lot of people did, John. And then, you know what, I just want to add to that really quick. Somebody wrote in the questions there in the chat about this being generational, and I get quite spiritual with this stuff, but it just backs up what you said there about, you know, you have an opportunity right now in this time to break a generational curse as such. And if we can now stop what's happened for many, many before us, because they didn't know how to speak out or where to go, and if we can now nip it in the butt by doing what we're doing so that our kids or the next generation of kids don't have to go through it, then let's keep doing it.
Absolutely. So that's why we're doing this. And I just want to make two or three final quick points. Is that we know this has been an issue. We know this is an issue for millions of children. I'm really worried about the lockdown. I've understood the necessity of a lockdown because of the virus. I've supported it as a shadow health spokesperson, but I'm really worried about this lockdown and how it's impacting on children. I mean, children may not be the face of the pandemic, but they risk being amongst its biggest victims. And we know that there will be millions of children not in school, trapped at home with somebody abusing alcohol. And as Josh was saying, this sometimes gets sort of written up as if this were talking about people on sort of park benches drinking out of brown paper bags. They're not. It's about those homes that on the outside, they may be very middle class homes, they may not be very middle class homes, but on the outside, you wouldn't think there was a problem. But when the curtains are drawn at night time, there's a parent in there doing nothing but just getting absolutely drunk, just getting off their face. And that was my situation. I mean, you know, croupiers and bunny girls, despite what may look, they might look glamour on the pictures, but they're not well-paid jobs. These are working class jobs, but they were jobs. On the outside, nobody would have known that there were problems in that household. Well, there were. You know, that's why my mum left my dad and went and married someone else and left my dad on his own. And I was an only child, so most of the 80s, me growing up in the 80s and early 90s, it was me increasingly looking after my dad as he would get drunk every weekend when I was with him. I was lucky, and I've said this many times, he wasn't violent or anything like that. He was just drunk. And when you're the only person there picking up the pieces, it's hard work. You're the person going to the shop to get the food in. You're the person who is left on your own all day while he's sleeping off the drink. And then when he gets up again, he's drinking again. But no, on the outside, from the outside world point of view, nobody would necessarily have picked up on that. So the kind of training that Josh is talking about for people who work in schools and people who work in youth clubs is so important. One of the things I want us to campaign on, if we can, in a non-party political way, is that one of the victories we had a year or two ago, thanks to the work of Liam and others, is that we actually persuaded the government to fund some pilot projects. And Camilla wrote about this in her newspaper, and NACOA won some money. So that was a funding announcement, I think, back in 2018. Given the lockdown, given the circumstances, I think we should be pushing government to expand that fund, expand it to more projects. And that is something I think shouldn't be a sort of party political issue. I think everyone should be able to get behind that. Jeremy Hunt, when he was the health secretary, was really decent about announcing that with us and working with us on that announcement, making it a cross-party thing. And I hope we can push on that and pick that up and run with it and try and get them to expand that project. And there's also, we'll need to think about this. There's a bit technical, techie this bit, but there's going to be some House of Commons legislation on the NHS in the summer. And it may well be, we may want to think about whether we can try and get an amendment into that legislation focused on children of alcoholics and asking the statutory bodies to take it seriously. Liam, we'll have to put our thinking caps on maybe about how we could do that. But I think that could be quite an important moment. We know in this lockdown that there's more drinking in the home. We know that people are suffering from anxiety. We know that prescriptions for antidepressants have gone up. So we know people are really struggling, and we know that if there's children involved, they'll be on the brunt of a lot of this. So I'm really worried that as we come out of lockdown, we're probably facing a whole range of mental health problems, not just addiction, the whole gamut of mental health problems, and that is something which we've got to be highlighting, but particularly highlighting the addiction issues and the drink problem issues. And it's why organisations like NACOA are going to be more important than ever. There's going to be more demands on your services, which is why we've all got to really get behind you. And that's why it comes to my final point. In 2019, I did my personal best in the London Marathon. And I was in absolute agony when I crossed that finish line, and I said, I am never doing this ever again. It is horrible, because that was the third one I'd done, and I think roughly every year I'd raised roughly about 10 grand, 11 grand, so I've probably raised about 30 grand. I've decided because I'm so sick to death of lockdown, I'm going to run another one for NACOA. So the email came round the other day with asking, because the MPs can get in on a special sort of MP ticket, if you like. And the email came round asking if we wanted to do it. And I've entered it. And the plan is that, assuming everything's okay with COVID, the marathon will be on October the 3rd. So I will be running it again on October the 3rd, assuming all the COVID situation allows us to run it. I don't think I'll get a personal best, beat the personal best, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for NACOA. I'm going to put that NACOA blue singlet on again, that vest on again, I'm going to hopefully raise some money for Nagoa, having told myself I would never run it ever again. But that, we've got a lot of work to do, over these next 12 months, because, I think, as I say, as we come out of this lockdown, we're going to find there's going to be a lot of children who have been in really desperate circumstances and are going to need our help. But what I am confident of is that the combined abilities, talent of all the people speaking on the call and all the people who are listening in from the different organisations, I think we can make a tremendous difference for children of alcoholics in the next 12 months. And I'm really looking forward to working together with you all. And I just want to reiterate that this is a big, big priority of mine. And I'm going to be running with this agenda and doing all I can to help children of alcoholics as well. So thank you. It's a real pleasure to work with you all. And I know we're going to work closely together as well. And in a few minutes, we're going to hear from Camilla, who I'm sure will knock our socks off, as she always does.
I thought you said you didn't have 15 minutes in you.
Fantastic. Lots of very helpful advice coming in for you, John, in the chat there. Not least if you can maybe just take some, I don't know, some core strength training from Calum. That might help.
Don't count on me. I did the marathon twice for Nakoa, and I will never do it again.
Calum, I follow you, as you know. I follow you on Instagram. Every day you're posting a picture of yourself from the gym and saying
that's my insecurities from this whole thing we're talking about here. You know what I mean?
In fact, the other day, I'm pretty sure the other day you said you're the healthiest you've ever been. So
this is fair. Mentally, John, mentally. You know what I love about you the most is that you said you didn't have 15 minutes of conversation and you just gave us 30. Love it, John. I appreciate your support so much, dude.
Excellent. Right, John, if this doesn't power you forward, my friends, I don't know what will. Right, I think we are going to go over to another little film. Is that right? We're going to hear another little 1-minute film now, which is the shortcuts animation. So if we could cue that up now, that would be awesome. And then it's going to be my great pleasure to hand over to Camilla.
I would pick out 3 titles and she would choose which one she wanted, and we would then make a game out of it. We'd change the main character's name to hers and we'd give all of the others different names. She would hide under the bed and she'd curl up. We'd make sure she had a toy with her, and if not, she had to go find one and bring it back, and she'd hide under the bed with her toy and I'd read her a bedtime story. She'd generally fall asleep a few pages in, and if she didn't, sometimes we'd sneak in another one.
The king was most impressed with both the rabbit and the polite cat. "Do you thank your master?" he said, and the cat left the castle, a friend of the king.
It was really hard to hear. With the isolation I felt, I can't imagine how isolated she must have felt at 5 years old, to not have anyone just to sit down with her, to tuck her in, even just to find her a toy to hold.
Yeah, there we go. Right, when we kicked all this off in Parliament in about 2015, 2016, there was a phrase we used which helped us just clarify what our mission was, what was our particular role that we needed to play. And we used to say to ourselves that we need to break the silence in order to break the cycle of this terrible disease cascading down the generations. And I think what tonight's discussion just underlines is that work doesn't stop. You can't just get out there, tell the stories, make a bit of an impact, and then pull stunts. You've got to continue with that work of breaking the silence. And that's why, the work that Camilla has done has been just so extraordinarily important, not only in giving it the prominence that it needed, persuading editors in her own unique way to do what she was telling them to do, but also, Camilla, the way you convey your story with such emotional clarity and force. It's a real pleasure to hand the floor to you now as our keynote speaker. Over to you.
All right, thank you very much, and thanks everybody. I'd already written some of this. Pierce has helped me with some of this speech as well, and then I just have written some stuff while we've been speaking. And I just wanted to say I love NACOA because it gets things done. We are a community of children of alcoholics, but consequently, as Liam pointed out earlier, we are a community of doers. We're a community of improvers, a community that tries to make things better, a community of talkers, but also most crucially, a community of listeners. And I can't tell you how glad I am to be a member of this community. For years and years, we've kept our feelings secret and under wraps, but now collectively, by finding our own voice, we are giving others a voice. And that's so powerful because we are giving children a voice. And David was right earlier when he said NACOA is the light at the end of the tunnel. Our survival stories have never been more powerful. And we've spoken about lockdown. And I'm sure everybody participating in this conversation and watching was worried over Christmas, the idea of children getting through Christmas, which is always such a difficult period for COAs, and then remain at home into lockdown in January, filled us all with dread. And I'm sure as well there are adult children of alcoholics watching here who have probably found the last 12 months, if it's anything like I have, as a period of quite a lot of introspection. And that's quite difficult for COAs. Particularly parenting has come into sharp focus because of homeschooling. And I must admit, over the last 12 months, I've thought about my mother probably more than I have in recent years. And I think that's because of this idea of being locked down with the children and feeling so responsible for everything that they're doing, and therefore questioning one's own parenting and the parenting that you had. And I think that can also be difficult. So I think reflecting on that 12 months is the right thing for us to be doing right now, and hopefully to empower us to make the next 12 months even more effective, because we know, as the speakers here tonight have discussed, that we have got an uphill struggle on our hands. And I'm going to give you some statistics on that a little later. Look, we also know, don't we, that NACOA isn't a fashionable charity because it does dare to talk about the problems faced by children when their parents are unable to care for them. And that's a taboo. And we know about the stigma attached to alcoholism. And we also know that it takes special courage to speak about these things. But NACOA provides an anonymous and safe space for as long as needed, with the promise always to care. And that's why it is so close to all of our hearts and why it does such astonishing work. And in recent years, I've been privileged enough to witness NACOA blossom into something truly game-changing for the children of alcoholics, both young and old. As a helpline, it stands strong for children at a time when support networks are often disrupted or removed altogether. And during the pandemic, of course, it has never been more of a lifeline for those in such desperate need of NACOA's help and support. And it is hard to believe, isn't it, that it's been a year since we were all gathered. I think it was in House of Commons Committee Room 14 for the last David Stafford Memorial Lecture. I remember I was running late and I initially stumbled into the wrong room and almost found myself addressing the Italian Conservative Society. Not sure whether my speech would have gone down as well there. But back then, the world was on the cusp of this nightmare. There were reports coming in, weren't there, from people on respirators in Rome. And thankfully, we have now turned a corner, and with the vaccination rollout, we are hoping that things will resume to some semblance of normality come Easter and summer. And that's important, because we know that this announcement coming from the Prime Minister on Monday with regards to school reopening is going to have such an enormous impact on the children of alcoholics, the 2.6 million children of alcoholics living in Britain today, who, let's be honest, have had a horrific 12 months. So we hope and pray that the government sticks to that target. We know that vulnerable children have been in school, but we know that there are plenty of others that will not have been identified by head teachers, social services, other agencies that will have just been suffering in silence. So the sooner the schools open for those kids, I think, the better. A year ago, of course, we had the wonderful Calum once again sharing his powerful and personal experience of being a COA. Naturally, Calum hasn't aged one day since a year ago. He seems to be the only person, apart from the Duchess of Cambridge, who manages to actually look good on Zoom. He also appears to be broadcasting from what seems to be a cross between a nightclub and the Eden Centre tonight. So Calum, I think you've got into plants and horticulture, which is no bad thing. But on a serious note, I do just want to pay tribute to Calum, who's been such a pillar of strength to so many young people over the years. And we all salute you for that, because you do make that connection. And it's so important, you know, young people look at you, you've been on the telly a lot, you're famous, and for them to hear your story is really, really powerful. Equally, he's not here, but I do want to mention Tony Adams, who was here last year, a fellow NACOA patron of over 10 years. And he's too been a beacon of hope for so many people, but particularly for men who have struggled with issues around mental health, alcohol, and the family. He's so passionate about the cause, Tony, and so candid and honest and genuine in what he says when he wants to help others. He really gives everything of himself to the causes he champions. And you know, that consistency of message is a lightning rod really for millions of vulnerable children and young people, to show that actually it is possible to have a stable, healthy and fulfilling life, even if you've had bad times in your childhood and you've had a difficult and hard upbringing. You know, and everybody who speaks to that effectively gives children hope for the future, and that's so important. Also, of course, I want to thank my old mucker Liam Byrne, only one of a handful of Labour MPs, including John Ashworth, who's actually willing to be seen with a Telegraph journalist in the common bars and restaurants and cafes. Often get a strange glance from some of their more left-wing colleagues. What on earth are these two doing with her, etc., etc. But thankfully, there are no party lines when it comes to championing the cause of children of alcoholics. As John was saying earlier, when we get together and do these initiatives, it doesn't matter that I'm working for a so-called right-wing paper with so-called left-wing politicians. We're all in this together, and thank God for that. And I don't think there's ever been any doubting, frankly, of Liam's commitment to this cause and in actually affecting change, because that's what it's all about. I mean, we can be on Zoom calls and we can chat this issue till the cows come home, but we've got to invoke change and at government policy level. And that's what he's been helping to do. So true to this word, in 2016, he launched a parliamentary campaign to put in place the national government strategy to support the UK's 2.6 million innocent victims of alcohol. And amazingly, and frankly, against all the odds, because I think a lot of us were thinking, is this actually going to happen? But Liam did create that all-party parliamentary group for children of alcoholics. It was something that many people never dared to dream of, to get it on the political map in that way. And that group stands as a symbol for something incredible and powerful and hitherto unheard of, actually. Children of alcoholics being listened to in their own terms and in their own words. And that's so important, a distinct group to deal with the children of alcoholics, not the children of addicts, not the children of difficult times, not the children of poverty, but this specific issue. And to pinpoint a specific issue is what we need to be doing when it comes to further pressuring the government to come up with policies that can provide more funding, but actually more help for the children of alcoholics that we all care so much about. So to have a voice in the so-called mother of parliaments, for once, where children of alcoholics aren't crowded out by other priorities, other distractions, aren't lumped together with another group of children, as important as those children are too, is really, really important. And it has led to actual substantive change, because that £6 million in funding that Jeremy Hunt agreed to when he was Health Secretary to go towards the services for children of alcohol dependent parents makes a difference. And that's the first government strategy of its kind in the world. And it's something to be unflinchingly proud of, frankly. This happened because people whose lives had been touched by this issue felt brave enough to stand up and to speak out. And it's happened because of all of you watching tonight. I have to mention, though, that of course all good things come to an end, and in March that strategy does finish. And I wish with all my heart that the government does do the right thing and continues to support children of alcoholics. I know Liam will be lobbying, I know John will be lobbying, I know I will be lobbying from a media perspective, Matt Hancock. And to be fair, we have had some joy. There was a bit of a concern, wasn't there, last year, chaps, about where the funding was going, and a few phone calls to Matt's very good former SPAD did make sure that NACOA got the cash it needed. But, you know, we don't need to be afraid. In fact, perhaps the pandemic has helped with this, John, in the idea of you obviously having a close relationship with Matt Hancock because of everything that's gone on over the last 12 months while you've tried to keep the government's feet to the flames on this, that we need to keep the pressure up. And without trying to be exploitative of what's happened over the last 12 months, never has there been a better case, a better time to make the case to help these children who have been so left behind. So it's amazing friends like Jonathan Ashworth, Caroline Flint, George Freeman and other MPs campaigning on this issue. If Liam's right and there are a third of politicians in the Commons who might be the children of alcoholics, then we need to tap up more of them, and we'll continue to do that. But that collective pressure makes an enormous difference. And I think we know with John and Liam and others that our interests are in safe hands in Parliament. And I just want to say a word to John as well. Not that I want to make this a love-in, because it's always embarrassing to have this praise heaped on you. But, you know, you're talking about me being busy, John. I'm not the shadow health secretary in the middle of a bloody national emergency, not seen since the Second World War. You're there every day having to hold the government to account, to ask the correct questions of Matt Hancock and the government strategy, to be preparing for urgent ministerial statements in the House of Commons. And yet still you're here tonight, and for reasons only known to yourself, deciding to add to your stresses by training for a London Marathon. All I'll promise is not to run the marathon with you, but I'd certainly be willing to train with you in Westminster. I can bring my trainers in to work, and maybe we can have some lunchtime and after school runs, I was going to say after work runs. So if that helps, of course, I'll do it. I also want to pay tribute, like others have, to the frankly unassailable efforts of Josh Connolly, who has basically been telling the world that COAs is a thing, and they need to know that. And COAs who haven't recognised that it might be a thing also need to know that, as do the children who are recognising that COA is a thing, thanks to Josh. He's also been rivaling Jeremy Paxman in the interview stakes, although to be fair, he's not as combative. He's handled his interviews with such sensitivity and care and thoughtfulness, and has extracted really some astonishing stories from people that again have helped countless others. And as Josh said, he's concentrating less now on his own story, on more on other people's, and that's what it's all about. I'm wondering whether I might need to tell my editor to offer him a job, actually, because he's becoming ever more capable as a journalist, frankly, in speaking to people with his Lunchtime Lives. And if you haven't seen Lunchtime Lives, first of all, what's wrong with you? But second of all, go onto the NACOA Facebook page, because they're recorded on there and you can see them, and they're bloody brilliant. So you must watch. I also just want to welcome our new members here. As you know, while staying true to its original aims, NACOA never stands still. And that's why it always continues to improve and help others. And so today we have welcomed new people to the NACOA family. David, we saw last year, and it's brilliant to see him here again, not least because he seems to have been completely emboldened by that experience to do wonderful things and shed loads of cash, which is always very useful. But also to hear from Sophie, and to hear from somebody, frankly, of Sophie's generation. I sound like I'm being really old, but just who can connect, frankly, with a new and different audience, and who also has been so courageous and sharing in her own story and her own personal experience in order to help others. And that's brilliant, because in order for this organisation to thrive, it needs to grow, and it needs to bring on a new generation of supporters. And so in people like Sophie, the charity's doing that, and that should be encouraged. And the more we can talk to others about this, the more support we are going to get for it. So let's just keep up that great work. As you all know, it is COA week, and at the heart of that, I think, are three core messages that we're trying to communicate. One, you are not alone. Two, together we can break the silence. And three, together we can break the cycle. And never before has that message, you are not alone, been more important. Isolation and lockdown weighs so heavily on these children, and especially those whose parents don't accept that there's a problem, or demand that the family secret be protected at all costs. I know there are so many people on this call who will identify with that. And of course, we need kindness more than ever. We need listening more than ever. And we need to help young people to break the silence and to break the cycle. It's almost 4 years to the day that I got involved with NACOA with the headline, "My mum is drunk, please read to me. And this was a Sunday Express front page story about NACOA counsellors having to read bedtime stories to children as young as 5 because their parents were too drunk to tuck them in at night. And we saw that wonderful film encapsulating that initial revelation that was made to me by a NACOA counsellor. I just couldn't believe it. Children young as 5. And of course, that made a huge impact. And it's about telling these stories and making people understand and know what's going on that really makes the difference. And I just want to share a few heartbreaking but poignant and important words from some of the helpline callers in recent weeks and months. I know it's sad to hear them feeling so isolated, but we can never lose sight of what's important here, and it is the people that are calling into NACOA on an ever more regular basis. So here's James. When COVID hit, I hoped her drinking would get better because of the pubs closing, but it didn't help. She just kept drinking more and more and more. It's hard because I can't get away. This is Dev. His drinking has spiraled out of control and he is drinking day and night with us, isolated. It feels like a prison. This is Anita. The rules are so confusing, it's making me really fearful. It's chaos at home and chaos out there. I've got nowhere safe to turn to. I say, and I think we all say, thank goodness that NACOA was there to answer those calls and to reply with kind and professional ongoing advice and support. It has been amazing, frankly, to see that that helpline has stayed open throughout COVID, providing a service that doesn't rely on outside approval or referral. It is free, truly inclusive and accessible to all. And let me just share some of those stats with you that I mentioned earlier, just so we know what impact coronavirus has had on NACOA's work. So calls to the helpline are at record levels since COVID hit the UK. Helpline contacts for the last year were well in excess of 31,000 calls. That's up 40% since 2019. Calls to the NACOA helpline doubled in national lockdown. They doubled. And calls from the 12 to 28-year-old bracket have increased by more than 4 times since COVID hit the UK. So that is teenagers and people in their 20s really suffering. There are also indications that alcohol sales have increased significantly due to the pandemic. So research indicates that of the demographic who have increased their drinking, people at the higher end of consumption are drinking more since COVID hit. The Office for National Statistics recently showed that UK alcohol deaths are the highest on record. And here's another crucial stat. Over 10,000 of those callers to NACOA are completely isolated and have not been in touch with anyone else about the problems they have faced. So just think about that for a moment. That is a third of those callers having no other help but NACOA. That is the lifeline that we're dealing with. These are kids and adult children of alcoholics who haven't discussed this with family members or friends. They're phoning up the helpline to discuss it for the first time. Now imagine the millions of children around the world who share experiences of those people that I mentioned earlier, those calls, who don't know about NACOA, don't know about this international treasure that is NACOA and similar accessible organisations. Awareness of these non-judgmental services should be at the heart of all of our agendas. The school's awareness campaign, as people have said tonight, is desperately needed from authorities to help children to find these services. You know, we build it and they will come, but they've got to know about it. And that is why awareness needs to be the A of our ABC when we go into the next year. At any time, as everyone here knows, it is the secretiveness that surrounds alcohol problems that causes the most harm. To escape that sense of deep isolation, these young people need a place to go and they need someone to talk to. They need to be heard and they need to be believed. A service to trust in a crisis and a place that does not impose arbitrary time limits or demands. Our reach is actually much wider now than it has been before. Yesterday, I chaired an international panel of champions for the children of alcoholics. We had participants from Slovenia, India, America, Germany. So there is now an international conversation taking place. And it was quite an eye-opener, actually, particularly the doctor who talked about the situation in India, which is really at a very critical point when it comes to growing amounts of alcoholism in all sorts of different demographics. Exactly the same situation as in the UK or other parts of Europe. You know, this is something that crosses class, financial boundaries, physical and geographical boundaries, and is becoming a real issue. So it was great for us to be able to share experience between us in a bid to help each other, as this problem, of course, extends well beyond international lines. So it's also great to see COA Week turn into an international commemoration and event, really, so that we can all share best practice, because obviously there's things we can learn from others and they can learn from us. Obviously, it goes without saying that responding and reaching out to this vulnerable group would not be possible without the extraordinary commitment and passion of hundreds of volunteers who provide their time freely given by people who truly care. And it's all about people, isn't it, at the end of the day? When given a voice, these children want to talk. They will talk if they're speaking to the right person, and they need to be offered that chance. And it is vital that really we get to the point of early intervention. We're staggered, aren't we, by the idea of a 5-year-old needing a bedtime story read, but you know, better to catch them at 5 than at 15. And there are a few individuals, along with all of the wonderful volunteers that are too many to mention by name, but there are a few individuals, of course, no speech would be right without mention of. Let's, of course, talk about Hilary Henriquez, who is, I don't know if she's on this call because she's been unwell, but she's the co-founder and she's the chief executive of NACOA for 31 years. She is not only someone who has cast so much light and given so much of her life to help others, but through NACOA, she has created a space where thousands of others can join in. And with that kindness, they can join events like this Amazing Awareness Week. So to include others, to share light in their work, to, in a way, words fail to articulate really the contribution that Hilary has made to NACOA over the years. And I think collectively, we want to thank Hilary for her energy, her commitment, her authenticity. We're all very grateful. So thank you so much, Hilary, for everything you do. I'd also like to give Piers, Hilary's darling son, a mention, because he's one of the unsung heroes of this. And bless him, you know, we've all been in these Zoom times and crikey, it's stressful. You're on mute. I can't connect and all the rest of it. And there Piers is at the background of all of these events that have been hosted over recent months because we can't all get together in the flesh. So I'm handling this stressful technological nightmare and doing so much behind the scenes to just help out, champion the cause, help the patrons, help the trustees, help pretty much everyone. So thank you again, Piers, for everything that you do too. To conclude, really, it's without, I think really, when we think about this and this community, as I started together and we reflect on each other's roles, it's all about kindness, really. It's about kindness, strength and commitment. And I apply that to everyone who has been involved in NACOA over the years, newcomers to NACOA, anyone that's doing anything for NACOA and people watching this. That sense of collective spirit that's exemplified by Hilary, Calum, Tony, David, Sophie, Liam, John, David, I've said more people than I can mention. NACOA would not have made such a difference to people's lives if all of these people hadn't been involved. I'm frankly just humbled by the lengths that people go to help others involved in this organisation, to help children who, even for some COAs who have had, as Josh pointed out earlier, very dark times. Some of these kids are still living unfathomably difficult lives, and we can never lose sight of them and what we need to do for them to make a change. And we know, don't we, that together we can help even more people affected by their parents drinking. And what we need to let them know to conclude is that they are not alone. Thank you.
Bravo, Camilla. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And thank you just, so much for the steadfast support in, you've worked in lots of really senior roles, in the media over the last 4 or 5 years, but your commitment to this great cause has been steadfast, and we love you for that. Thank you so much for everything you've done. And thank you for leading the hymn of praise to Hilary and Piers. I know what a mess I was in the summer of 2015 when I got on a train from Birmingham to Bristol, and just and just sort of walk through the doors to meet Hilary, and the welcome I got, and the way she helped me pick myself up. I'm not really sure I'd be here without having had that. So this is like about the most on-time panel I've ever chaired, which is fantastic. So thank you. So we've got about 20-25 minutes for questions, if that's okay. And I'm going to put some of this to you, Camilla, but if it's okay, I'm going to bring in others. But I think, you can kind of treat it like a free-for-all. So whoever wants to pitch in, you just pitch in. There's sort of 2 or 3 questions that have come up in the chat by way of themes. And I would say, so John, there's a bunch of questions which I think I'm going to send in your direction, which are about the 6 million that went into the pilots. How do we reconnect with that? How do we bring it back? The government promised years and years ago to do an alcohol strategy. No sign of that. So there's a whole kind of public policy piece, I think, that it'd be good to get your reflections on. Josh, there's a bunch of questions for how people can help NACOA, basically. So how do people support? How do people get involved? How do people volunteer? And then there's a bunch of questions which are basically about communicating, which I'd love everybody's opinion on, really. So how do people think that we can package things up better? How do we continue to innovate there? How do we use Instagram or TikTok? How do we work with the BBC and some of their children's programming? So just getting some of that media savoir-faire, I think would be super useful. But Josh, maybe I could start with you, if you don't mind, because we've had a number of people log on here to kind of say, look, amazed by what they've heard tonight. What can they do to get involved?
Well, there's a few things now. With COVID has taken the training online, so we now deliver to become a volunteer. You can do the training that is delivered online, so you don't need to be in Bristol for that, which is a big thing. It means that you can join from anywhere in England, in UK, and then once you are a member, then it really is about how much you want to go out and just bang the drum. I guess the way that I started doing a lot of the things that I did was because I could no longer get to NACOA in Bristol when my, I don't know, 4th, 5th or 6th child was born, one of those ones, and I couldn't get to Bristol anymore. So I started thinking, what could I do from home? And I got inventive, and that's how COA as a thing was born, and that's evolved over time. But once you do the online training with us and you train to be a volunteer, really the possibilities are endless, because you're a volunteer then, and you can actually go out in your local community and speak to the schools and speak to other services to see if they want you to go in and perhaps give a talk or raise awareness for NACOA. So with the training being online now, there's a lot more scope than there perhaps once was.
Yeah, and I would just say money is another good thing to give. Sometimes people go to the lengths of running marathons, which is obviously a mad thing to do to raise money. You don't need to do that. You don't have to run marathons, but you can give money to John Ashworth to run them on your behalf. And you've seen some of the incredible work. I mean, it's not free, this stuff, right? It's quite expensive. So in particular, the work developing education resources for schools, it's not free, it's quite expensive. So so cash dollars are good, actually, if you can. If you don't want to volunteer, then that's another very practical way to give. John, public policy, blah de blah.
Well, I think we've got
these strategies, funding.
I think it's really important that we do all we can in Parliament, Liam, and with the support of colleagues on here who can push the messages out in the country, that we get the government to extend the funding that they announced 3 years ago. It would be disastrous for that funding to end in a lockdown when we know lockdowns are exacerbating the problems, or to end as we're coming out of lockdown. So I think we need to pressure ministers. I've actually already raised it in the House of Commons. I raised it in the House of Commons last week or the week before, actually, and didn't get a response. But I think it's worth us pursuing that. I think the government have sort of delayed or shelved an alcohol strategy for now, probably because they don't want to engage in the debate around minimum unit pricing, which is a difficult debate, I suspect. But we certainly know that we've got a problem with alcohol in this country. I mean, outside of the situation affecting children impacted, throughout the pandemic, obviously people have died from COVID, obviously, but deaths from liver disease are up 11%.
Yeah, it's massive, isn't it?
It's a huge increase in deaths for liver disease. That's not just about alcohol, it's also about obesity, when alcohol actually impacts obesity as well. It may possibly also because people who have got serious liver problems are not getting the care that they should be getting because the NHS has had to postpone a lot of treatment to focus on COVID. So it's probably not as simple as to simply say more people are drinking, therefore more people are dying. These things are always more complex, but nonetheless, it's hugely alarming that excess deaths from liver disease are up 11% throughout the pandemic. That's an extraordinary increase in the numbers of people dying from liver disease. So, and alcohol will be one of the factors. So we really do have to push the government on this. But I think the easiest thing in the short term is to push them on the funding for the alcohol, children of alcoholic schemes, because as Camilla says, we're world leading, and the government agreed to do it on a cross-party basis. There's no reason why they can't continue this on a cross-party basis. And then I think you're right. We need to look at perhaps look at the proposed legislation that's coming to Parliament to see if we can use that as a way to lever in some changes that we're looking for. But given that bill will probably come to Parliament in June, or for second reading at least, we've got a bit of time to think that through and how we want to play that. But I think we should try and look for an amendment to that bill, hopefully a cross-party amendment, which we can try and get support in the country for. I don't want to bore the listeners, but it's sometimes easier to get these things done in the House of Lords and the House of Commons because of the way Parliament works. But I think we should try and find an amendment that we can all unite around for that bill.
I'd say there's also there's a few questions coming up in the chat there about the relationship with education as well. Department for Education, teacher training. I'm not sure to what extent we've pursued that.
No, we've sort of focused it on Parliament through the health prism, and this is obviously a wider issue. And I talk to teachers all the time in my own constituency who raise issues around alcohol abuse, because as Joshua said in his presentation earlier, this isn't about people on park benches drinking out of paper bags. Yeah. There's a subtlety around this, and it's not people who the statutory services, social services, and so on would necessarily identify. Because it's not necessarily chaotic families. I come back to my own, on the outside, my mum and dad had jobs, right? And nobody particularly knew or no officialdom didn't know that once the curtains were closed and the doors were shut, I was on my own with a father who was just getting blind drunk. So we've got to think about what role schools have in this and identifying this. Just another point, which I noticed somebody mentioning about places of worship and gurdwaras and things like that. That's a really important point. I represent Leicester as people know. I live in Leicester, very diverse city. There is a lot of alcohol abuse going on in communities which we don't know about, and where it is, or perhaps where it is hushed up or whatever. I particularly know that so I know a lot of teachers who tell me that in a lot of different diverse communities, a lot of abuse is going on, and we need to find a way in which we can support those communities as well, because there's a lot of stigma involved, and how can we support those communities, I think, is a big challenge for us.
Yeah, so Ali's just commenting there, one of the best ways is to get things covered in PSHE. Yeah. Okay, Camilla.
I was just going to add to that point
Give us
about
free political strategy on this.
Well, I was just going to say on political strategy, obviously, I think I don't mean to kind of be exploitative, but sometimes in life there are just the right times to do things. And obviously the government is now going to be in recovery mode. And we know it is, although Jonathan and Liam might disagree, but I know in Downing Street, they are taking the social justice agenda really seriously. They've got the CSJ, that think tank that Ian Duncan Smith, like him or loathe him, set up in Downing Street advising on policy. And they're extremely sympathetic to the children of alcoholic cause. So by the by of, and I agree with Jonathan's plan for an amendment perhaps to that NHS bill and the keep holding of the feet to the fire when it comes to honouring that funding commitment. I think also there is going to be an appetite when we come out of lockdown to try and repair some of the damage. And therefore those statistics that I cited in my speech, we need to kind of weaponize them in order to tell the government how serious this situation has become, to stress the urgency and use all channels that we can. Equally, that point that Ali makes about PSHE, and that's obviously an issue for the Education Secretary, although it wouldn't surprise me if we don't have a different Education Secretary come autumn. And let's just see who that person might be and how amenable they might be. But yeah, we do, in my humble opinion, I don't know what other panelists think, the PSHE curriculum, as far as I can tell, speaking to my own kids and doing a bit of research, doesn't include this specific issue. It talks about drug problems, and I think it talks about smoking, and it talks about underage sex and other issues. It simply doesn't include an element on heavy, hard drinking parents.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if it was just like a half hour of one class that year 8 students had to listen to, then that would be better than nothing.
Yeah, B's just coming in saying no, it definitely doesn't. Okay, that's been really helpful. Let's talk about getting our message across and getting our message through. And Sophie, I'd like to come to you first because you made this important point about the way that we package the story, the way we get it across. Sometimes it's a bit harder. We've had a few kind of interesting comments coming in on the chat now about, are we using Instagram effectively? Are we using TikTok effectively? Do we need to be advertising on Instagram? I mean, any sort of particular observations on how we sustain the creativity and innovation needed to just keep reinventing and refreshing and rejuvenating this story to get it across?
I think it might help to maybe get involved with some influencers and what they're doing on platforms like TikTok, because I think for young people now, they see this entire panel as old fuddy-duddies and we don't understand what they're going through, blah, 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 blah. And on TikTok...
Some of that's true. Some of that is.
I think on TikTok, they need people who they relate to, but also something Josh said earlier really struck a chord. And that was about teaching people how to spot the signs of a child of an alcoholic. And I think in the same way that when you think of breast cancer, you don't think of traumatic stories of people's surgeries, you think of running marathons and baking cupcakes. I think we could do a positive campaign in the way that you empower people with how to support and direct children towards the charity.
That's super interesting. I mean, David, how have you found communication works best for you in terms of getting your message across? I mean, you talked about you had inbound a load of messages, but did you notice any kind of patterns in things that you'd said that had cut through?
A lot of my stuff came from the interviews that I've done where I've spoke about it, and people that I wouldn't realise have seen those interviews were getting in touch with me. And then I think what happened is a lot of people now, a lot of younger people now are starting to see my background. They're coming up with stuff that I've said in the past, and then it's resonating with them. The big thing for me, I think, is, especially with mine, is social media. I just think it's a massively powerful tool. We can, I mentioned something about advertisements and things like that, where you hear on radio or Spotify or whatever, commercials. But it's Instagram. Every kid has got the nose in this.
Yeah.
And they're just constantly there like that. So when you see on your, I don't know, technically, I think the algorithms where it pops up and you see these adverts just pop up with what you might have interest in, sure there's some way of starting to drop these little, even if it's just a flash with the helpline number. Sure, there's some way of advertising across social media that's not complicated, not complex, because you don't know who's scrolling through and they see that advert. Not so much Facebook, yeah, but I think not a lot of the young kids are on Facebook.
Yeah,
it's your Instagram, your Snapchat, and your TikTok that are the main things really for those.
Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, certainly, you know, in our business, we think much harder now about how we create assets that we can give to others in order to incorporate in the work that they're doing, and creating that kind of family of assets that provide a bit of signposting for people to incorporate in stuff that they're doing anyway, just helps you multiply the reach. But Calum, I'd be really sort of interested in your sort of observations on this, because obviously you've been at the cutting edge of quite a lot of this for some time now.
I'm with Camilla on what she said about we don't want to take advantage of, but we have a really crucial time to really dig the message in deeper, you know, and I think that really needs to be hit home. And I was just thinking to myself, you know, this message will be shared and we'll do what we do without a pandemic going on in the world, but I feel that right now is a time to create some sort of campaign. Like I want to team up with you. I want to team up with John. I want to team up with Camilla. I want to put a platform and a face and faces to something, and then get it on the morning shows. Make enough noise where there's enough pressure that some people go, okay, we need to do something about this because they're banging on the door hard. That's how I feel. I feel like we'll continue to do this, but there's everybody out there right now is doing what they can do in different sectors to make sure they get their point heard. Why can't we do that? You know, why can't we create something to rattle some cages politely and respectfully, but enough so that they say, okay, actually, now that we've got this new funding or this new thing, we have to take care of you because you brought it to our eyes and made a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Just very quickly on that. Somebody's kind of said, you know, we need a Marcus Rashford moment. Just from a news perspective, a Marcus Rashford moment happens when a government does something really bloody stupid. Someone says, this is bloody stupid, can you change it? It's different to launch a campaign, and I'm not saying that I don't agree with Calum 100%, and we can do this, but it's not the correction of an idiotic governmental error. This is us saying in very strong language, you know, a bomb has just gone off in the lives of X million children, calls have doubled, there's this epidemic now, to coin the terminology of the recent months, of mental health issues, particularly among a particular group, because of this culture now of growing alcoholism within families, and therefore action must be taken this day. But as Calum says, you know, that requires a huge amount of mobilization. We need to be realistic about the other competing voices who are all going to be shouting for time, airspace, and indeed funding from the government, as a load of charities we know are literally on their final knees and aren't raising enough money as it is. So I appreciate what people are saying about Rashford moments, but we might need to think slightly.
No, I think that's a point well made. But I think the other thing that was interesting about Marcus is that he was sharing assets. So, you know, there was a pretty well organised campaign. The stuff that was created was very shareable. He's obviously got phenomenal reach, but sometimes just making sure we've got those assets that actually each of us can then adapt and play with and deploy in different ways, particularly if we can do it around signature moments that, as John says, may be coming up in Parliament.
Yeah,
about that. Yeah.
I wouldn't want to take any credibility away for the past 30 years of what Hillary's been doing, but I also think to myself now more than ever, and please excuse me if I'm out of turn here, but somebody like Piers Morgan, who's on the show, and when he creates some sort of thing, it then snowballs. There's some sort of follow-up to what happens there. And I have a vision, as selfish as it might sound, but of going on this and creating everything that Camilla just said about all these things that are going on to create enough noise that could be the Rashford moment where you know, that's now out there. And if the government doesn't take the right step, you can counter with a Rashford. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, no, you can challenge people to do the right thing, and when they don't, actually you amp it up.
I just feel like there's something big and powerful to be done, and I just feel now's a great time to do it. So
yeah, It must be. I mean, it must be, because, you know, COVID has cost so many family members. We have to make sure that COVID now doesn't cost futures, you know, for all of those kids now in lockdown. Right, coming up to past. Let me hand the floor back to you guys then, just for any sort of final thoughts and reflections, maybe thoughts on ambitions for the year ahead. What would you, we're quite a bunch of doers. Anything you'd like us to really get done by the time we meet again in 2022? Camilla, do you want to kick us off?
God. Well, I mean, I think Calum's strategy is right, and I think it's quite easy to get in touch with. We almost need to formulate, and with perhaps Sophie's help, some of the younger influencers. Like, I am interested in that idea of tapping up influencers. I'm just, I don't know who the hell they are. I should ask my 12-year-old, right? But I mean, we could get a hit list together of people we need to get on side in order to communicate this message as punctually as we can, not least in light of whatever happens next week, and mobilize on it very quickly. That would certainly be helpful, just from a practical perspective of who it is, particularly among these younger generation and the TikTok generation, that we actually need to be tapping up. Because I've got the contacts with the Morgans or the Matt Hancocks or the whoever's of this world. I mean, Jesus, we could even try and get royalty involved. And I know that the Duchess of Cambridge has obviously been championing addiction issues, so she would be the easiest catch, although never that easy to get. But, you know, we can do all that high profile.
If you could just ring her after this, that would be great.
I've actually got her number, would you believe? I haven't spoken to her. Hi. But joking aside, that's cool. So we can square off your kind of like your well-known people, but I wouldn't mind having a list of people that we should tap up who I don't know, but who my daughter definitely would. Sophie?
Yeah, cool. Okay, Sophie, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's there's been some great thoughts coming through. I think social media and tapping up influencers, and I'm sure Calum has a lot of contacts in that world as well, people who are have a lot of power on social. One thought that popped into my head, and I could be going completely in a totally train of thought, and you're like, get back. One of the things that I've noticed is counsellors and therapists in the NHS have very little awareness, unless they've done it themselves, about how being a child of an alcoholic can affect you as an adult. And I know that I was sent into a nervous breakdown from a therapist who didn't know what they were dealing with, which was a gift, because now I'm well and happy and found recovery. But yes, that's just something that is rarely talked about, how therapists don't actually know that this is dealt with in a totally different way to normal depression.
I think that's completely right. Josh, you're nodding there.
Yeah, Josh.
Yeah, look, I think it's a really important point that Sophie's just made about the way in which people that have suffered, you know, some of the things that we have. I think the biggest struggle that we've got is to try and find potentially influencers that may have experienced this, that might happen to be younger. We're looking for a real niche category, because we're looking for somebody who has lost their parents, probably, otherwise they're not going to be happy to speak about it, perhaps doesn't have any siblings, because they're likely to have siblings that are not going to be happy with them speaking about it. I wonder if the biggest headway we got, Camilla, was when we got on the front page with the bedtime stories. If we can utilize some of these quotes that we've got around what's happened during lockdown and COVID, and then we can get some young influencers to read a couple of these stories and say, listen, we're not actually utilizing people that have necessarily experienced this, but read this. And if you get a young, you know, when I say young person, I'm talking late teens, early 20s, read a couple of these lines and go, wow, we need to help these people. Then actually we're galvanizing people that are even beyond. We're not just looking for, we need COAs who have got parents that aren't here anymore that are able to talk openly. Let's go and reach people and say, did you know this is happening? Did you know 1 in 5 children go home at night and feel like they're not good enough because their mum and dad get lost in a bottle of wine? Yeah, can we almost utilize some of the bad stuff that we see, the wine o'clock stuff, the kids are in bed, let me get the wine out? Can we do some sort of counter campaign rather than actually going out and sort of sort of head, like trying to hunt them down. Let's create our own campaign around that kind of stuff that I don't know, that's like the opposite, that shows what happens at wine o'clock for a 5-year-old, when mummy does wine o'clock, what happens when daddy gets on the whiskey at whatever it is, what happens to those kids. Because then we might actually get people to flip on their heads. I think we've got to be a little bit careful that we don't just bash them people, because a lot of them don't even know that what they're saying is not funny.
Yeah.
So if we can actually portray the other side of it and go, look, that might be funny, but look at this. Yeah. Then you might have something.
All right, but just very briefly on that, because we discussed this and I can see Kerry and Maddie and others talking about this issue, you know, just to say, when pitching stories, for instance, I pitched a story a couple of times, I tried to get it in on those birthday cards that kind of constantly referenced getting pissed. Yeah. That gin, kind of hurrah for gin effect. I mean, actually, hurrah for gin is quite funny when it doesn't mention gin and just mentions how chaotic parenting is at the moment. But, you know, the news desk response is a bit, just so you get a picture of what it's like on papers. Yeah, but, you know, like, the readers like a drink. Like, we don't want to be moralizing. We don't want to be moralizing to people.
Yeah, but that's
what you're facing. I'm just saying from a news perspective.
But my point is, you don't call them out. We don't go, they're not funny. We go, actually, they might be quite funny, but how about this? Because I think when you call them out, you are, you know, a lot of these people don't have our experience. And I actually think we shouldn't expect them to have our experience. I don't want someone to know what it was like for me if they've never experienced it, right? I don't want them to have to walk on eggshells and think they can't make jokes about having a drink here and there. That's up to them. But can we show the other side of it? So we don't go after them. We go, what about this? And that's slightly different.
Let me just bring Sophie back in.
Sorry, I just wanted to say something quickly about campaign ideas. Again, going back to what I said earlier, it's about putting that positive spin on things, because every campaign at the moment taps into that millennial Gen Z kind of way of thinking, of wanting to make a change in the world and wanting to be seen doing good. And so if we can do it in a way that if you're not from an alcoholic family, you're not an alcoholic, but you feel passionate about it and you know what you can do if you see that issue, then it's more likely to get legs behind it, because people get a bit turned off by anything negative.
Yeah, that's a good observation.
Very quickly, with regard to the influencers, I know this isn't what we're campaigning on, but actually a lot of that younger generation are seeming to be celebrating their teetotality. I don't know if
my kids, totally, my kids are exactly like that.
If we can get sometimes you don't campaign directly, do you? You kind of like do a segue campaign, which helps our campaign in turn. It might be easier to get the influencers to extol the benefits of not drinking, just as a sideline to what we're trying to achieve. That might be all we could achieve, perhaps, in that community of people. But that's really powerful.
We're running out of time, so let me just bring in for final words Calum, David and Jonathan. Calum, final words?
Just thinking, I think we've got everything we need right here to make it happen. I just think that maybe once we create what it is we're going to do next, i.e. some sort of campaign, then we look for a bunch of people around that time to support it as well, to get the word out. But everybody here can make the big enough difference.
Okay, cool. David?
Just to echo what Calum just said there, I think we do have the right network. And with the people that we all know in our own fields, then surely if we get the messages right, then it doesn't have to be a long drawn out thing that we get these influencers or get these people that we know that can connect with the kids. It's just a short little bullet point. Maybe they speak it, maybe they hold up a card saying it. A little campaign like that, I think, will be very effective across social media. Yeah,
very nice. John, let me give you the final word. I think I've got
thanks, Liam, and thanks to Nicole and everybody coming along. It's been an inspirational discussion. I was just thinking about Camilla's shrewd observation about Marcus Rashford's brilliant campaign, about how he was campaigning against something the government were not doing. It does strike me that if the government don't renew the funding that they put in place
I agree.
for children of alcoholics, that could be a similar moment for us. That could be the moment when Calum and David and Sophie are out there on the media, you know, speaking with passion about this. Now, I'm not one to disagree with you, Camilla. If they're looking at this internally, they're looking at it internally. But we've got to put the pressure on them to make sure they expand that little bit of funding that we won, this group of us, NACOA, people involved, people watching us, you know, campaigned on it, and we won that victory two or 3 years ago. I think it was 2018, wasn't it? You know, we've got to get them to continue that funding and and hopefully expand it as well. There's bigger things we've got to do in this campaign, but that would be a good, important victory on something to us to focus on in the immediate term. And if they did abandon that funding, I do think you could get your Marcus Rashford moment there, and Calum could be on Good Morning Britain with Piers Morgan.
Can we call it Calum Best moment?
Hey?
Can we call it Calum Best moment, please?
The Calum Best moment.
Yeah.
Call it Calum Best moment.
Can I just add one more thing, Liam, just to also use the flip side of the big vision, guys. Everybody on this call, just remember, it's little steps that every single one of you make. It's your own charity fundraising. It's your own marathon. It's your own tea parties to help raise funds and awareness. Take those little steps, and there'll be bigger steps made as well. But all of us take some sort of steps, and we will get to where we need to get to.
Yeah, brilliant. Right, I'm going to wrap it up there, guys. That has been absolutely extraordinary. So, Piers, to all the team behind the screen, great job, fantastic work, really great. Give all of our love to Hilary, please. And you know what's just been so amazing tonight is the way each year it kind of moves on in such an incredible kind of constructive way. And you know this is an incredible team of people that has delivered results, is succeeding, that is passionate, determined, and we all know we couldn't change things for our parents, but we're sure as hell going to change things for our kids. So look, thank you so much indeed for joining us tonight. David, wherever you are, I hope you're looking down and seeing what great work we're doing in your honour tonight. Thanks everyone indeed for joining us. Stay in touch, be safe, be well, keep fighting on. Take care. Bye for now.